tell you a story.
You? Really? What kind?
Something that happened to me many seasons, many years ago.
God of War Sons of Sparta is the long-rumored and now recently shadow-dropped God of War spin-off. I remember when we first heard murmurings that a new 2.5D Metroidvania God of War prequel spin-off was coming, and being intrigued. And I will say, after playing the game, I got issues which honestly keeps it from being great, but it's still a fine little game. But let's talk about it. Hi guys, DPX here reviewing today God of War Sons of Sparta. Now before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, to hit the bell, leave a comment, or I will send all the Greek gods to murder your family.
Duty over everything!
Starting off with the good, I love the story. It's a prequel to the entire God of War franchise. Everything we learned, like, in the franchise, Sons of Sparta takes place before all that. What I was not expecting is this to take place when Kratos was a kid. Sort of. The story is really told in the form of Kratos telling his daughter a story about him and his brother Deimos. They are undergoing military Spartan conditioning, but once their friend goes missing, they go out and search for him, thus thrusting Kratos into his first real adventure before becoming the God of War that we come to know. But even when it cuts to the parts where Kratos is telling his daughter the story, even that takes place before the first game. So we get a more calm and reserved Kratos when talking to his daughter, and a younger and less experienced Kratos during the actual events of the game. And he has this banter and interactions with Deimos which are really fun. It adds a lot of the just charm and character to the game. It's the little things like teasing each other about girls or aspirations for becoming a Spartan, which I understand that's not really a little thing, but it just adds a lot to the game. And what else adds to these moments are the voice performances. Young Kratos' voice especially stood out to me because I was wondering where I heard that voice from. It turns out he's voiced by Anthony Del Rio, who voices Pit and Kid Icarus. T.C. Carson, the original voice of Kratos, comes back to voice the character during the flash forwards. The voice performances help these moments really stand out. Then we got the Metroidvania of it all. Sons of Sparta has many Metroidvania elements, because it is a Metroidvania. It's all one big interconnected world, with certain paths blocked off because you need an ability to open up that path, which you unlock later on in the game. This game certainly does that. I mean, is it really a Metroidvania if it doesn't? And although I do have some issues that have to do with the game being a Metroidvania, I will say the areas throughout the game are really cool both visually and for exploration, along with the many abilities in the game that you unlock. The game sort of feels like how a 2D version of God of War should feel, which is kind of a necessity because this is a 2D God of War. But I think it translates really well. The combat as well is really good, although a little by the numbers. I do have some issues with it, but the combat on its own is good. The game also incorporates the PS5 controller in very interesting ways. For example, there was a moment in the game where I had to blow into the mic on the controller in order to solve a certain puzzle. Stuff like that I think is really cool. I also gotta give it up for the music. Bear McCreary returns from the Norse games to compose the score for this game, and it's really solid. And even the sound design is great too. And trust me, a game really needs good sound design in order for me to even bring it up. But wow, does the sound design in this game just... It's just great. Overall, I liked God of War Sons of Sparta. But... moving on to the mixed, one thing worth mentioning that's not good or bad, which is why I'm putting it in the mixed, is that Sons of Sparta is a lot beefier than expected. Like, this is really a full-blown Metroidvania that should take like 15 to 20 hours to beat. Again, not a bad thing, just something to be aware of. That sure caught me off guard, I'll tell you that. Then we got the biggest point of contention in regards to this game in terms of, like, you know, the conversation surrounding it, and that's the art style. I will say, after the leaks and rumors of this game, this art style was definitely not what I expected. I was definitely expecting something more akin to like a Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. However, the art style really grew on me the more I played, and I don't have a problem with it. Another thing I'm mixed on are the puzzles. Some of them were fine, others were quite tedious and not very fun. And lastly, the Metroidvania elements. I praised some of them, Sure, but many games of the genre have a little where do I go in it. I go into Metroidvanias expecting that, but in God of War Sons of Sparta, I don't know, it sort of just felt like it was prolonging the game. On the one hand, I can't get too mad at the game being longer than I expected, but on the other hand, I feel like it just sort of overstayed its welcome. Like, it was longer because it felt like padding. Maybe that should be in the bad, but I'm putting it in the mix because we'll see how I feel about that as time goes on. Moving on to the bad, first off, some weird technical issues. Not that many that really broke the game, although there was one moment where a puzzle glitched which left me basically soft locked and I had to like quit the game and like restart it basically. But there were many audio glitches where characters would repeat lines of dialogue, not in like they say the same thing twice, or other lines of dialogue would just be delayed, or like text for the dialogue would show up on screen, but the characters don't actually say the things that they're supposed to be saying. It was very strange. And there were also times where the game drops in frames or straight up freezes or lags. There were certain abilities where this would happen consistently as well, and it was pretty distracting. Another issue I have is you can't skip the cutscenes. Now I know what you're thinking. I said I really liked the story, so why would I want to skip the cutscenes? Well, let's say you go to a boss fight and a cutscene plays before it. You don't skip the cutscene, obviously. But what if you died at the boss fight? The cutscene plays again, and you can't skip it. That is just a pet peeve of mine. You won't let me skip a cutscene that I've already seen. And yes, by the way, if you go into the game settings, there is a way to turn on what the game calls cinematic skip, but that lets you skip the smaller interactions with other characters as opposed to the important story cutscenes. Which I understand not being able to skip those for the first time, but let me skip them after I've already seen them. I know I rambled about that, but that's more of a quality of life issue that doesn't hurt the overall game too much. What does though is the stiffness to the game. And that is ultimately my biggest issue with God of War Sons of Sparta. It feels stiff. And not in a good way. It's not so much an issue during exploration or traversal, but when fighting enemies, specifically multiple enemies, or sometimes there is one really strong or big enemy, or when fighting a boss, you tend to really notice how stiff the game feels. That's why I was saying earlier that the combat and gameplay by itself is solid, but it is very stiff, and it makes fighting bosses feel a lot more needlessly frustrating. And look, I don't mind a good challenge. There's nothing inherently wrong with the game kicking my ass. Plus I acknowledge you might think I'm good at video games because I play a lot of them and I review them, but I'm actually not that good at like most of the games I play. I acknowledge that. But there were many times in this game where I felt like the game kicked my ass because a button I was pressing did not actually translate to a move in the game, which caused me to die. Maybe it's a skill issue, again, you know, not ruling that out, but I have also heard other people mention how stiff the game is, so I don't know, but it kind of made the game not fun. Look, I can admire that God of War Sons of Sparta was a fun little passion project for Santa Monica Studios, and on the surface, I like what they did here. It really builds on the mythology and lore of the God of War series and shows sides of Kratos we've never seen before. The art style, while maybe not what I expected, really grew on me. The voice performances really help the story work so well, and the game's areas and music and sound are really, really well done. But the biggest hang-up for me is how the game feels in tight situations, because at times, I really wasn't having fun. And I think that's the ultimate factor. Is the game fun to play? When it comes to this game, at times, yes, it was fun to play. But other times, no, it really wasn't. So because of that, I give God of War Sons of Sparta a 7.5 out of 10. Look, most people are saying that this is a solid game. You know, most people have higher opinions, higher reviews of this game than I do. So just keep in mind, my opinion is one opinion on the internet, as opposed to the deciding factor. So, but what do you guys think of God of War Sons of Sparta? You guys like the game, not like the game? Have you guys played it, not played it? And if you haven't played it, do you guys want to play it, not want to play it? Anything about the game, let me know down below. Anyways, be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, or I will send all the Greek gods to murder your family.